Hello, YouTube. This is Mike. All right, so I just got an interesting comment on one of my earliest videos. Excuse me, I just ate something, forgive me. How sociopathic of me. Just got an interesting comment on one of my very first videos. And it's called, the video itself is called, Are Borderlines Sociopaths? Do they have empathy for you? This was on January 6th of 2020. Go and look at the screenshot for that. You will see how out of sorts I am. You'll see there's a difference between then and now. And there's also another video that I made 6 months later where I said, are borderline sociopaths? 6 months later, my opinion. So it's really important for people, if they're watching this channel, to understand that my views are changing as time goes on. So I'm perfectly happy to change my opinion because I'm not emotionally attached. I'm not here to be right. I could care less about that. So before I go any further, if you're new to this channel, let me explain to you what this channel is about. This channel I made for people who are not borderlines, who have been or are currently in a romantic relationship with somebody who has what I call toxic borderline personality disorder. This may not apply to you. So before you start sending me nasty messages about how I'm stigmatizing or I don't know what I'm talking about or whatever else, listen to what I'm about to say. So what I'm calling a toxic borderline is somebody who is either undiagnosed and or is not in treatment, and or if they are in treatment, they haven't yet developed the ability to monitor their behavior in a constructive way. So that's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about, in all my videos, when I talk about a borderline or I talk about toxic borderline, I'm talking about that. If you're somebody who's in therapy and or you're lower on the spectrum and or you are perfectly capable of having romantic relationships with people and relationships with friends and you know how to manage your symptoms, this video is not about you. This channel is not about you. If you are a partner of a borderline and you love your borderline and you get along with them and they don't harm you and everything is good, then this video isn't for you. This video and this YouTube channel are for people who have been on the other end of a toxic borderline, who have tried everything that they can to try and make the relationship work, and it has devastated them. They are going through post-traumatic stress disorder. They're having tremendous psychological issues as a result of being with a toxic borderline. And there's not a whole lot of places for people like that to go who can get balanced information, because if you spend enough time on my channel, you will hear me defend borderlines and people with borderline personality disorder from stigmatization. And you will hear me say over and over again, they're not evil people, they're not evil geniuses, they're not out to destroy you, they have a mental illness, they're doing the best that they can. And then I will explain how horrible it is to have what they have. I want everybody to have empathy. I have nothing but empathy for them. Doesn't mean I want to date a toxic one, but I have empathy for them. So let's get back to the title. And the title is of this video is, Are Borderlines Sociopaths? And then I can't see the rest of the title, but I think I said something along the lines of, what is true empathy? So let's just get right into the comment. So again, this was on my first video about our borderline sociopaths I've made. This is the third one now I think I've made. And this video was January 6, 2020, and I was literally just getting out of it, like days earlier. I had just been discarded and I then blocked all communication, and I was making this channel because I was desperately trying to separate myself. I was trying to heal myself, and I was trying to understand the illness, the mental illness of borderline personality disorder, so that I wouldn't get lost in my own codependency, because I was really struggling to not call her back or connect back with her. You know, I really wanted to move on and heal, and it was tough. So I was talking it out. I was talking to myself, really. I didn't even know anybody was going to watch these videos. This is how I work through things. I talk them out. And so I was explaining to myself how borderlines are sociopathic and that they don't have empathy, which means they will hurt you. And so that's what that video was about. So let me now read the comment. So the comment comes from, and I hope she's watching. I put a reply, and I said I'm going to make a video, and I hope you watch it, and I hope she does. So let me just read her comment first before I say anything else. She says, "I'm sorry, sir, you are way off. Read a book about the criteria and different types and motivation. That change in them," and again, let me just say, people leave comments and they don't put any context to it. She's not alone. Almost everybody does it. They assume, there's one thing that I said that makes them, and then they have to type the thing. And they think I know exactly what sentence they're referring to. So who knows what I said? I'm assuming it had something to do with the title. Anyway. "I'm sorry, sir, you are way off. Read a book about the criteria and different types and motivation. That change in empathy is called splitting." Thank you. "And yes, during sensory overload." This is really interesting because she's giving us an insight into what borderlines think is happening. But as I've come to understand, there's a deeper process that's even happening beneath their conscious level of what's happening. And people who have been borderlines who have been in recovery for decades have, after doing tons and tons of self-analysis, have come to the same conclusion. And so a lot of times I will make observations about what I believe is going on with the borderline, so that the non-borderline can understand and to separate. And much of the time I'm accurate. In this instance, I'm accurate as well. But this is good. I'll try not to stop anymore, but this is good. Listen, you'll find out what this person believes is going on and what their experience is when they split. So let's continue. This person goes on to say, "That change in empathy is called splitting. And yes, during sensory overload or fear of abandonment, empathy is affected. But most people with BPD feel too much and can often be empathic." I think what she means to say is empathetic. Those are two different things. Being empathic and being empathetic are two different things. She says, "There is a spectrum. You think people with BPD are sociopaths? Then why the two different classifications of illness?" 5 exclamation points. "Look, it seems like the girl you dated was a bitch BPD of no BPD. I don't know what that means. But what issues do you have to stay with her? It takes two to tango. You are biased," she means to say biased. "You are biased, lack understanding and empathy yourself, and very obviously not a professional in mental health." Now we get to the truth of it. She says, "Yes, I have BPD. I'm also highly emotionally intelligent and extremely compassionate and empathetic, especially regarding people's suffering. I do sometimes hold people up on pedestals, and when I'm let down, yes, I do look at that person differently, and sometimes in the moment care less about their feelings than mine, especially if I feel like I'm about to be abandoned. This is me projecting that fear, insecurity on that other person. However, if that person were to start crying or make it obvious I was hurting them, it's likely I will feel absolutely awful, or let's say that person were to get a call with bad news, like a family member was sick or hurt or anything else that is horrible, something that had nothing to do with us. I would forget our issues for the moment and comfort that person because I can feel people's pain. I can feel people's joy. And you're right, some people with BPD are very attached to their partners or loved ones' emotions because most people with BPD lack a stable identity. They base their identity off feelings, and that's another reason why it's easy to be very black and white and come across as if they adore or hate you. When things are good, they feel great and vice versa. Also, yes, often we do feel empty because that lack of identity we feel, and it hurts because you never know where you fit in the world, so you do become codependent often. But a sociopath, they, meaning sociopaths, are empty because they don't feel empty. They don't care about anybody's feelings, barely their own. And they don't mind it. They are okay feeling empty. It is quite opposite for BPD people. There is a terrible stigma around BPD because of people like you. I do understand that some people are higher on the spectrum than others, and I can understand why you feel that way based on the description of the girl you gave. When you said she wouldn't drop everything to help you out. I've dated people like that. It's possible people with BPD can have a comorbid with other disorders like narcissistic personality disorder, and I dated someone just like that. It was awful. 2 BPDs and 1 NPD. It was awful, but it was one experience. You're doing a huge disservice to the mental health community by posting this video that is not based on facts, overgeneralized and biased, ED, past tense. That's what you want to write. Bias is a thing you have. Somebody has a bias. A person is biased. BIASED. Sorry, I have a thing about language. All right, so I'm going to have some fun with this. But before I do, my intention is not to demonize, attack, criticize, or argue the person who left the comment. In fact, quite the opposite. Let me first thank you for the obvious work that you have done on yourself. Thank you for noticing and wanting to understand what happens inside of you. So I can see that you do have some awareness about that. Now, as I said in the beginning, this is the 3rd video that I've made. That video you saw is a year ago, and I was coming out of the worst experience of my life. The most toxic, horrific, debilitating experience of my life. And that was why I made that video. But I made a second one 6 months later, my thoughts about it 6 months later, and I changed my tune. I said, are they sociopathic? Technically, no. And then I talked about that. Because I was further away from the pain. I had healed myself, and as you say, very astutely and very accurately, that it takes 2 to tango, and as you say, very well. Let me see if I can find it, because you say it really well. While you're also attacking me and criticizing me in not the most compassionate way, you do say, what was it? Anyway, I can't find it. But you said, so what is going on with me that I would be with such a person? Exactly correct. I'm in complete agreement with you on that. Nobody can get hurt. Nobody can get entangled with a borderline unless they have some unresolved psychological codependent issues. It's impossible. Somebody who has a strong sense of self and is not currently vulnerable to their codependent issues is going to look at a borderline. When they come at you, you're going to go, there's something off about that person. By borderline, I mean a toxic borderline. And they're not going to get involved. And more, or they'll get involved, and after the first couple of splits, they'll go, wow, this isn't fun. I'm not doing this anymore. But the person who stays, they've obviously got something going on. And that is exactly what this channel is about. It is about helping those who have been damaged by toxic borderlines to first see that what is really going on with the borderline, so they can separate and get rid of the delusion that they can fix the borderline, and to take a look at themselves and see that they, like the borderline, are projecting onto them, which keeps them in this enmeshed, wounded state of, back and forth. So I'm in complete agreement with you about that. As I said before, if what you say is true about yourself, that you're not like those people, then this channel isn't about you. And I think I even said that in my response. I think I said in my response something, I said, after I said, watch other videos, etc., I say, I invite you to watch these videos as if you are the partner of a borderline. So instead of defending yourself against what you feel is stigmatizing criticism against you personally, see if you can truly empathize with people who have been severely traumatized by the effects of BPD. None of this is personal and none of this is about you. And that's really important because that's what empathy is. Empathy starts with knowing that this isn't about me. And again, my borderline ex used to use that kind of phrase and say, I think this is your problem. But that was just her not taking a look at herself and being sociopathic and lack of empathy and distancing. So I'm talking about if you're able to individuate, if you're able to have your own identity and your own feelings and your own sense of self, other people's feelings don't become personal. And especially when they're not talking about you personally. So I don't know who you are. You found my video. I didn't come knocking on your door. I didn't email you and say, hey, I've got this video about borderlines being sociopaths that I made about a year ago. Could you please watch it? And I'm sending it because I think that this is about you. And I didn't do that. I don't even know who you are. So this isn't about you. And if you truly are one of those borderlines that's on, not that high on the spectrum, then you should, ideally, maybe you don't, I don't always have the ability, so I'm not saying you have to, but ideally, you should have the ability to go, wow, that's what happens with somebody who's with an untreated toxic borderline. That sounds really awful. And if you have true empathy, you're going to go, wow, have I done anything like that? No, not to that degree, but I have done that. Or you'll say, wow, let me see what it's like. Because what you reveal here is what also, if there's any service that I can give to borderlines, which I don't think, let me just be clear, I'm not a therapist, as you say, I'm not a borderline. I'm not here to try and fix borderlines. For some reason beyond my understanding, a lot of borderlines watch my channel and a lot of them seem to like it. In fact, some of them say I use it for therapy. I'm not saying to do that. I'm not a therapist. You do that. Like I said, I don't know how it helps you. I'm glad that it does. I'm here for the non-borderlines. But if there's one thing that I can do, if I'm able to, it is to help borderlines be able to truly empathize by understanding the effects of their mental illness, not they themselves. They're not doing it. That's the mental illness doing it through them. The toxic experience that they themselves have because they have that is the same experience that your partners have as well. And so you can't separate the two. And I'm not judging you for having BPD. Not at all. In fact, I believe that I have a very good understanding. I think I can have about as close an understanding to it without actually being borderline that somebody can have. Maybe that's accurate, maybe it's not, I don't know. Anyway, but let's analyze what you said, because what you're showing here in this is that you are not showing empathy at all in this. I've read the whole thing, so let me just say once again, if you had empathy, why are you making this about you? Especially when you're not one of those bad borderlines, as you call it. You called it, the one I was with, you said, seems like the girl you dated was a bitch of a borderline. So if you're not one of those, true empathy would be, wow, let me see it, try and empathize with the pain that this guy's in. Why are you not able to do that? Why is it about you? Just sit with that for a little bit. But let me just look at this because the language tells me a lot. And before I go any further, let me be clear about something. I think this is really important because one of the things that borderlines understandably say, I understand why they say, no, you don't understand. I'm not a sociopath. I'm not a narcissist. I actually feel too much. I have too much empathy for people. I feel other people's feelings. I feel other people's pain. That's the problem. If you could just understand that. Or they make the argument of, well, if you could understand what was going on inside of me, you wouldn't judge me for the things that I do. Do you have any idea what it's like to have to split and to have these feelings? If you understood that, you wouldn't. Both of those responses show a complete lack of empathy for the people that are being damaged on the other side. And that's the stigma. The stigma of BPD is not whatever you think it is. Like this person says, just because they have BPD, they automatically feel that I'm stigmatizing them. But again, I don't know that. I don't know who you are. I only know what you do. And if you are somebody who has BPD and you're capable of interacting with me in a constructive way, I'm not going to have any negative feelings about the fact you have BPD or green eyes or blue eyes or gas disorder or anything else. I'm only going to care if what you do hurts me. It's the only time I'm going to have a negative thought, feeling, judgment about you. You need to understand that. The stigma isn't in the label. The label is meaningless. It's a way of identifying what causes that behavior. That's all it is. So if you say you're BPD, but you don't act like a BPD, I could care. You can call yourself whatever the hell you want. I won't care. I have no agenda. And I'm telling you this, your partners and your friends have no agenda on pointing fingers. I'll tell you who might. Family members. This is something I found out that, it was very interesting. I was reading about from a therapist's point of view, and he was asking, why is it that borderlines don't recover? What is one of the reasons? And one of the big reasons was that there is an assumption, there is a programming in the family where they're looking for somebody to be the scapegoat. And that's part of their family dynamic, is that, Mary is the really screwed up one. She's the borderline. And so, as I teach on my other channel a lot, what we all do is we have to, when we individuate, when we learn to be ourselves, we have to make the choice between pleasing others or pleasing our soul. And oftentimes when we make the decision to please our soul, we break the programming that our parents or our friends or our society has against us, and they will attack us for it. Because we are actually if we act like the crazy people, then we actually are the scapegoat for them, so they don't have to look at themselves. And so in order to keep the love with the family and have them love you, you will continue to act out and stay ill. Perfect example was, I was just flipping around, and Dr. Phil, right? Remember the Cash Me Outside girl? I'm sure you've heard of her. And he talked about how he got her because her mom brought her on the show, was complaining about her. Of course, she was, whatever the hell was wrong with her. And of course, all the focus was on her, how screwed up she was. And so he got her into some, place separated from her mother and went to some boot camp, something or other. And she was there for like 3 months and totally revolutionized her. Being away from her mother and in that environment, totally revolutionized it. She was like a leader and helping people. And all it took was one day. It took one night. She was back home with her mother. And in one day, she went right back to where she was because her mother was stalking people on the internet who was calling her bad names, and she was finding their phone number. She was acting like a nutcase. And so what did the daughter do? In order to fit in and get mommy's love, she went right back into the programming, even though mom brought her on and said, look at how screwed up my child, which she was. That was the role she was designed to play in order to get mommy's love and approval. And so for borderlines, it can be the same. A lot of them can't recover because they're the only ones that are in therapy. The rest of the family aren't. And look, I haven't seen anything that shows me that borderline personality disorder happens outside of toxic families. I haven't seen that. Everyone that I've looked at, everybody that I've talked to, you find out their home life, at the very least, there was some confusion and some emotional abandonment, at the very least. So, if you are able to get your behavior aligned in a way where it is constructive and healthy, I could care less if you're a borderline. I'm not going to stigmatize you for that. I'm only going to care about what you do and how it affects me. And this is the truth with the world. The stigma is not that you have the label BPD. That's just a way for people to go, oh, that's why they do that. The stigma is the fact that people are damaged and hurt. And the borderline does not understand how toxic their behavior is to other people. That's the problem. We are all, and this is the truth, like you say in here, you're willing to stop and listen to somebody who's in a lot of pain, and my hair is off to you for that. But everybody, I guarantee you, everybody that's on the other side of it would stop and take care of you if you were able to have your feelings and then not split the moment after you had them. If you were able to have your feelings, talk about how sad and how much pain you were in, and let people love you, and then not turn around and reject them or attack them for loving you, we would have no judgment. We would be there for you and take care of you. And saying that, I understand this is why it's a mental illness, because the splitting is not something you have very little conscious control over. I say very little because at some point you can get control over it, as I understand. But in the beginning, it's virtually impossible, which is why I tell people not to have relationships with borderlines until they've been in therapy for 10 years. And even then, you still gotta, they might not even want to be with you after that because you're a codependent. They're not gonna want to be with a codependent. Anyway, let's keep going because I want to show you how this response really shows the lack of empathy, what sociopathic feels like. Okay, so this person says, wants to explain that splitting. She says splitting is called splitting, and then she goes to describe what she says causes it. This is important because this is her experience. So I'm not going to deny her experience. What I am going to say is that there's things going on the unconscious level. Unconscious means you're not consciously aware of it. So this is important. Like, there is a person on YouTube who, when I first started making this channel, again, if you look back, I was in tremendous pain. You think about the lack of empathy and the sociopathic nature of what I'm about to describe. I was talking from personal experience, and I was in a huge amount of pain, and I was trying to heal. And there's somebody who has a channel devoted to BPD. This is somebody who claims to have been cured of it. This person, the first interaction they have about me is to make a video about me and start calling me names and, taking things from my other channel out of context and pointing fingers at me. And that person has been trolling both of my channels, creating fake YouTube identities and then leaving really nasty, horrible comments. And this is somebody who says that BPD is not a mental illness and says that splitting is not caused from feelings of love. And here's what I want to say about that. This person is in the same neighborhood. I think that person is anything but cured. I think that person is a typical borderline in that they talk a really good game. They intellectually know things. Being able to emotionally live that, whole other deal. And that was my experience with my borderline ex. She could talk a good game. She knew. Like this person says here, I have BPD. I'm also highly emotionally intelligent. Yes, that means that you can identify your feelings, you can talk about feelings, you can talk about what you did wrong and why you did this, you can take responsibility verbally, you can look at your partner and say, you're feeling that because I said this and your mom did that to you, and that makes the person go, oh my God, they're so emotionally intelligent. But that doesn't then line up if you're a toxic borderline. That doesn't line up with your actions after the fact. Because if you're highly emotionally intelligent, then that awareness, that emotional awareness, which is really what you're saying there, you're highly emotionally aware, that awareness then has to translate into consistent action going forward. And that's the problem. We don't care that you had a bad moment and you attacked us in a bad moment. Everybody does that. We don't even care that you did something really horrific. We don't care about that. Especially if you turn around and then you're highly emotionally aware and you tell us why you did what. We're like, oh, well, we can help you with that. What we care about is that your emotional awareness does not follow through into the future. That's what we care about. That's the stigma. And again, even if I was stigmatizing, how does that affect you? How does that affect you? If you are, as you say, a borderline who doesn't do that, then nobody in your life cares. They only care how you interact with them. Just because you have the label BPD, they're like, oh, that's interesting. But, I still love you. I get along great with you. That's all they're going to care about. Really important. You understand that the stigma is about the actions. It's not about the label. It's not about your feelings. It's not about your worth. It's not about even the fact that you project. It's not about any of that. It's about the fact that when you are triggered and you're wrapped up in your narcissism, understandably so because of the horrific abuse and because of the mental disorder itself, I totally understand. You really believe that we're out to get you. You really think that we're going to destroy you, and you act out of an impulse to protect yourself. I totally get that, and who wouldn't in that circumstance? But it doesn't change the fact that when you do, it damages us in ways that obviously you don't truly understand. You might be able to get hints of it, but and what this person says shows this. And I'm not doing it to attack her or criticize her. I'm hoping she can listen and hear that. So she says that during sensory overload, I understand that, or fear of abandonment, empathy is affected. Now here we get into euphemizing. I'm quite certain if you were to talk to the person that's on the other side of your empathy that's being affected, they're not going to say, wow, your empathy's getting kind of affected there. Their response is going to be, what the hell are you doing? Where did your empathy go? Why are you being so cruel to me? On your end, your empathy is slightly affected. This is what I mean. There's a difference. There's a difference between your experience of your feelings and other people's experience of your feelings. And this is why it's important. I understand borderlines what they want more than anything is to be understood. They want people, what they didn't get, and this is what they did not get as kids, as infants. It's so horrible. What they did not get as infants is just being loved because they exist. That's the worst. That's why it's to me, it's the worst possible scenario. And borderlines are, they're not true NPDs they have the exact same issue going on, but they're so well defended they never become vulnerable. But that's what makes them easy to spot. But what makes the borderline so difficult to spot is that they go through this sociopathic lack of empathy to having all seemingly emotionally aware to lack of empathy to emotionally aware. And that makes us feel like we're going crazy. And that's why people walk away thinking that you're sociopathic, because who else would act like that but a sociopath? How could you be so loving in one moment and then in the next moment be so horrifically cruel and then the next day not remember or not take responsibility or make it my fault? Or you feel really guilty about it one day, but then the next day you're like, yeah, but you did this and this to me. I mean, we don't understand what the hell's going on. It is so confusing. And to make any sense of it, like I did in my first video about our borderline sociopaths, we have to conclude they're sociopathic. Because if we think that you're not, then we get pulled into it and we want to help you, and that just makes you end up hurting us again later. So the lack of empathy is really not understanding and addressing that there isn't a change that is taking permanent effect. For you to only isolate it about, I actually feel a lot, I feel too much, that's what's going on with me, that doesn't mean anything if that feeling doesn't translate into action. So let's keep talking about it. First, somebody says here, before I go further, I think a friend has BPD. Should I tell them? I think you should do more research into BPD. If it's a friend, I don't know how important it is. If that person is being really, really toxic to you, and you're going through this tug of war, which can happen with friends, then what you should tell them if they're toxic is you should say, listen, I just can't be friends with you anymore. It's just too painful for me. I love you, but you're hurting me with this behavior. I think you might have borderline personality disorder. And then you should leave them alone, not have any contact with them, and leave it up to them. They'll either get help or they won't. All right. But, I'm really not here to talk about friendship, because maybe you can be their friend and, it doesn't affect you as much. I'm talking about romantic relationships. But, I don't know if you're using friend in quotes. Like, is this a fuck buddy that you're friends with, you're being romantic and sexual with? Then we're talking about something else. All right, let me go back to I want to try and get through as much of this as possible. So you're euphemizing when you say empathy is affected. You're euphemizing when you say fear of abandonment. Because it's not just fear of abandonment. The fear of abandonment is triggered by what I believe is coming from the unconscious, which is on an unconscious level, you actually feel tremendous love. The love that is coming to you strikes you and hits you, and then the knee-jerk instantaneous reaction is to go straight into the fear of abandonment. But what triggers that is actual love. And that's why we keep coming after you. That's why we keep trying to fix it. That's why we keep trying to work it out, because we can feel, wow, they really felt that. But the narcissistic, sociopathic flip of the switch that happens so fast, in your perspective, your experience is you just got overwhelmed. You don't really know. All of a sudden you hate them for no reason. Or you have this elaborate reason for why, in case like the last discard I got, there were 2 words. She said the same thing about herself. She said she was very emotionally intelligent and aware. And she would say, people should always be able to talk things through no matter what's going on. And that's what I'm all about, which made me go, oh, finally. But then I said 2 words. I said the phrase magical thinking. And that was it. That was enough. She had mentioned magical thinking days before. She had even said that she had magical thinking days before. But because I used that phrase with a smile on my face, talking about how crazy it is that people have magical thinking, and I have magical thinking, and she was going to go get help for BPD, and I said, oh, by the way, borderlines have magical thinking. That was it. That was then I was out to get her. I was going to destroy her. I was trying to destroy her self-esteem, and she wasn't going to go to therapy now. She didn't want anything to do with me. I was the most destructive person that ever existed. I can never talk to you ever again. So isolating your experience when you're splitting and not acknowledging what you do right after that split is sociopathic. And what my experience with mine and with other people, they have the same experience, is that the split isn't just because out of nowhere this fear of abandonment comes, which it can. It's that the intimacy that's being created with your partner starts to create a vulnerability and a bond. You never had that as an infant. You never bonded with your parents. So when the bond tries to happen, you have only one response, which is to split. It's not just that some strange the sensory overload is the sign that you're about to split. The sensory overload is that on an unconscious level, you're starting to come apart because things are starting to really heat up and there's like real connection starting to happen. Or you just had like the best sex of your life and the best pillow talk, and then all of a sudden the sensory overload kicks in. With mine, we went out to dinner. Now, we've been out to dinner before. She took me to restaurants where it was loud, and she was fine, but that was early in the idealization phase. She had no problem being out in public with me while she was idealizing me. Then she came to visit me. I went and picked her up. I brought her up to where I am, and we went out to one of my local restaurants, which is, we're starting to really bond. We're starting to get close. And all of a sudden, she can't handle the noise, and she can't handle this, and she's flipping out. And we went to 3 different restaurants because they were all too noisy. So that's your experience, that you're having this sensory overload, and I understand that feeling too. But there's something else underneath. It's okay with me that you're not aware of that. But to euphemize it based on this, you just had a sensory overload. I just felt vulnerable. There's other stuff going on. And what you're not seeing is what's happening with us. That we are investing emotionally in you and becoming really vulnerable, and we're making plans for the future, and you are co-signing those until you split. And it doesn't take away the horrific pain when you explain it like this. Well, I couldn't help it. I was having sensory overload. I was afraid. Can you understand that? I was afraid. Don't get mad at me. I was afraid. We're not mad at you because you got afraid. We're mad because you hurt us. All right, so let's see what else. Then now she's going to talk about. She's going to try and explain what it's like to split. And again, what I'm trying to point out is that this is somebody who's euphemizing. They're minimizing. And that shows a lack of empathy. It's the lack of empathy. Let me explain. The lack of empathy isn't because you're a bad person and you don't feel. The lack of empathy is because you're so stimulated, there's all this need to protect yourself, which is understandable. And when we are in that place of trauma and when we are trying to protect ourselves, everybody loses empathy. So there's nothing unusual about this. When you break up with somebody, you lose empathy. When, people in war, when you get mugged, you lose empathy. People lose empathy all the time. It's not a bad thing, but let's keep going. So she says, I do sometimes hold people up on pedestals, and when I'm let down. Let's just take that out of context. What do you mean when you were let down? That has a judgment attached to it. And just because you feel somebody wronged you in some way does not necessarily mean that they let you down. There's no way to hear that without feeling guilty. What do you mean I let you down? Well, that waitress walked by and you looked at her ass when she walked by, and then you looked at me like nothing had happened. Well, I was telling you what was going on with me and you looked at your watch. Obviously, you weren't listening to me. Those are things where, you can feel that somebody let you down, but that doesn't mean that's what happened. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, perhaps they did. But see what I mean? This is this narcissistic self-justification. Yes. What'd she say? When I'm let down. She doesn't even say when I feel as though. She says when I'm let down, then yes, I do look at that person differently. And sometimes in the moment, I care less about their feelings than mine, especially if I feel like I'm about to be abandoned. None of that justifies the actions. It's okay to have the feelings. I'm never going to talk you out of your feelings because they're feelings. How can you talk somebody out of their experience? That's not what's important. What's important is what you do. To use that to minimize your sociopathic, your lack of empathy, it's not helpful for anybody. And it's really not taking a look at yourself. But I get it, because you have, if this is how you function in life, you have to protect yourself, because otherwise, right, the stigma, again, is people go, oh my God, she's so cruel, she's so up and down. That's the stigma. And then you find out you have borderline personality disorder, and people start to figure out, oh, people with borderline personality disorder do this thing called splitting, and they love you one moment and hate you the next, and oh, fuck, I hate that. And then you think that I'm stigmatizing you because you have BPD. I'm not stigmatizing you for that. I'm stigmatizing you because I hate feeling like, a piece of garbage. And that's what borderlines do. When they split, they make their partner feel like garbage. And as you say, it's because it's coming from within you. So let me read something which really helped me. In fact, it was right around this time. I may have even quoted this on that first video. Hang on one second here. I just want to check something. Okay. So this is a website, the sociopath. What I typed in, because I was trying to figure out, are borderline sociopaths. Because when I was looking at the things that she did, it was obvious that she had no empathy for me whatsoever. When she discarded me, zero empathy. In fact, the way that she discarded me was so horrifically cruel. It wasn't just cold. When you break up with somebody seemingly for no reason and that's it, it's really cold. She did it at the most opportune time, seemingly to cause me the most damage. As it turns out, it was the time that would have created the most intimacy, because it was Christmas. She broke up with me Christmas Day after me crying in her arms Christmas Eve, after she had just tore me a new one because of her stuff and I was taking care of her. And I was crying saying, you really hurt me so bad and I don't want to hold on to that because I really want us to work this out. And I cried and I said, please just don't discard me during the holidays. I can't take that. Just please talk to me. Whatever you're feeling, we can talk it through. She wiped my tears, told me how much she loved me. I'll give you my car. I'm not using that one. I'll do this with you. I'll do that with you. I'll be here for you in all these ways. I'm here for you. Next day. You said the words magical thinking, and I can't get that out of my head. And now I realize you're out to destroy me. Christmas Day. Merry Christmas. Go back to your home that I had got for us. And there's no furniture in it. I don't even have internet, and it's Christmas Eve, and all the neighbors are having family over and parties, and I'm on a mattress in the middle of an empty house. The worst possible scenario. So the cruelty of it was I could not fathom the cruelty of it. And I couldn't, it came out of nowhere and for nothing that I did, and it was the worst possible thing anybody could have done for me at that moment. So this is what I was dealing with, and I talk about it in that video. So I was trying to figure out, how could somebody do that? She must be sociopathic, because how else could somebody do that? And so I was looking around, I typed in sociopath, borderline personality disorder, and up came this page, and it was really helpful. It says this. Borderline personality disorder. And it says, this person, the borderline, does not appear to be narcissistic at first glance. People who suffer from borderline personality disorder don't have the inner strength to maintain the facade the way the other antisocial personalities do. They will swing from a position of high competence and disdain for others to depression and self-doubt, believing they are much worse than others. They can be very confusing because they often are bright and very skillful and yet never really tend to believe in themselves. Because they cannot maintain the image of success, they often quit before they achieve success. In a relationship, they are very difficult to be with as they have severe mood swings that are not caused by any external event, meaning you. They often feel victimized and will turn into a vicious persecutor at the drop of a hat. If you're a quiet borderline, it means that you ghost and you become you turn that inward, but you still end up devaluing them, even though you think it's okay, I'm not yelling at them. We still feel it exactly the same. Will turn into a vicious persecutor at the drop of a hat because they personalize almost everything anyone else says or does. Like this person is personalizing me talking about my horrific pain of having been discarded and abused by a toxic borderline. This person made that whole video about them instead of saying, wow, that's really sad, how painful for that person. I don't agree with all of it, but I can totally understand why he would feel that way. You really have empathy, that would have been your response. Because they personalize almost everything anyone else does or says, it is difficult to know how they are receiving what you are saying to them. When I was the last one I was with my borderline, we were laughing and we're hugging each other and we're talking about how silly we are, when we try to use our intuition, and I'm laughing and I say something about, and borderlines have magical thinking, so I understand it. I am looking at her face and she was smiling at me 2 seconds before. I'm smiling, we're hugging, and then this look on her face. She goes, oh yeah, right. And then she put it together and pretended like she was all okay, which of course she had split. Because she's quiet, she didn't tell me. I didn't hear about it until the next day. Because they personalize almost everything anyone else does or says, it is difficult to know how they are receiving what you are saying to them. If you want to know what it's like being on the other side, we are constantly walking on eggshells. Because it doesn't matter what we say. Like we could say something the day before would have been the most wonderful thing. We say that again the next day, it's the worst thing. We're working overtime trying to figure out what to say and what not to say. We think if we can just figure out what the triggers are, we'll figure out what those are. We'll never say those. What are the ones that make them love us? We'll say only those things. But it switches from day to day. And so we have no idea what you're going to do based on what we do or say. We have no idea what's going to trigger you. Try living with that. That's no fun at all. Bottom line is we end up not having any value because you don't, as empathic as you can be, borderlines, in those moments you have no ability to know what we truly feel, and which means that we're worthless. And what is that? That's a projection of what happened to you as a kid. When you were an infant, your parents didn't even know you were there. It's horrible. The pictures you see of, now that it's Christmas time, the pictures of the Madonna and Christ, right? The Mother Mary looking down at Jesus, either as a baby or as, the one where he's dying and he's on her lap. If you look at those icons, there's this blank look with just a slight tinge of love. And what it represents, especially the mother and the child, where she's just staring into the child's eyes. That moment is, on a psychological level, the mother is reflecting back to the child, I see you. I see you for who you are, and in this moment, I acknowledge you exist. Imagine what happens to the person who never gets that. It means that nothing they say or do means anything, that the only thing that matters is, what facade they put on. That's why they do it. When they lose their facades, if you've noticed, they fall apart. They can't get out of bed, they can't function, they don't know what day it is, they don't know what your name is, they don't even recognize you, because they're back to that place of being an infant who nobody's acknowledging, and they're staying broken in that. It's horrible. So that feeling is what the borderlines induce in their partners. Whether you rage at us for no reason we can't understand, or you rage at us because we loved you, or you go silent and you give us the silent treatment, or you ghost us, or you cheat on us, or whatever it is, the end result is that we feel that we have no value, we don't exist. And the craziness is us trying to put some reason to it, like, well, is there something I can do? There's got to be something I can say or do that is okay. And there isn't. And so we end up being infected with what you had to live through as an infant. Now, of course, we do have our own issues, those of us. We don't end up with borderlines because we have individuated and we got a strong sense of self either. Let's go on. Because they personalize almost everything anyone else says or does, it is difficult to know how they are receiving what you are saying to them or doing to them or doing with them. This also leads to a fair amount of paranoia. They are very concerned about what others think about them and often believe others do not like them. In some ways, they often can look like the reverse of a narcissist in that they can be very sloppy in their dress and have poor body hygiene. One of the difficulties in identifying the borderline personality is that they can appear very different in public than in private. Also, they are not consistent in their behavior or their presentation. Here was the thing that really helped me. This is what really pulled me out of it. It's important to recognize when relating to a borderline that you don't really exist. When they see you, they see a fuzzy image that is filled in with projections from their own unconscious. If you do not realize this will make you feel very crazy with them. In fact, most children growing up in the family of a borderline parent have a deep, abiding belief that they themselves are the one that is crazy, not the parent. Anyway, so that's getting back to this, to the sociopathic part. So this person, again, one of the main arguments that borderlines give is, no, you don't understand. I have too much feeling. I have too much empathy. And I want again to acknowledge your experience. I'm talking to the borderlines now. I want to acknowledge your experience of your feelings. But there's a difference between your narcissistic experience and actual reality. And that is true for everybody. Empathy comes when you're able to put your narcissistic experience aside long enough to go and climb into the other person. That's what you don't do. You're able to throw your experience inside and sometimes jump inside of us. But when you're having an experience, you're not able to put yours aside and be with us. So even hearing you describe it, I feel a lack of empathy there. Because it means your emotions are more important than anybody else's. And everybody feels that. What you feel is no different than anybody else. The only difference is we have a few different tools to help us cope with it. That's the only difference. And it's sad because it's a huge difference, and it does take, as I understand, at least 10 years to be able to get to that point to at least act in that way. So to say things like, I do sometimes hold people on pedestals and when I'm let down, so you mean when you idealize them, then your projection, which is your projection, you're projecting onto them, which is just as destructive as projecting onto them negatively. You project onto them positively, that is setting you up. You are setting yourself up to then be let down. What you get let down by is that they don't live up to your unrealistic expectation of them being godlike or parent-like. That's not my fault that you did that. You saw me that way. I didn't make you do that. Then I get punished for it? I didn't let you down. I'm just being me. You let yourself down. That's not my fault. It's okay that you go through that, but it's not okay to punish me for it. So she's talking about the splitting is I idealize you, and then when you don't live up to that expectation, then I am very let down. And yes, I do look at that person differently, and sometimes in the moment care less about their feelings than mine, especially if I feel like I'm about to be abandoned. Now, here's true maturity. Again, I'm not attacking you. I understand it's an impulse. You can't resist it. But maturity is being able to feel as though you're going to be let down, to feel as though you are about to be rejected, to feel as though somebody has negative feelings about you, and act with love, compassion. That's individuating. That's going, wow, that person has really, really horrible feelings about me right now. It's got nothing to do with me. Wow, I hope they don't, are they going to reject me? Instead of lashing out at them, you reach out and you go, is everything okay? Can I help? Let's talk about it. If you got something going on, let's talk about it. That's maturity. Now, it's an ideal, and not even non-borderlines don't live up to that all the time. It's an ideal, but it's an ideal that we need to shoot for. And for those non-borderlines, the problem is that it's much more difficult for borderlines to learn how to do that. I'm sorry, but that's why it's a mental illness. It's a mental illness because that becomes very difficult, in some cases virtually impossible, especially without long-term therapy. And so that's really, that's the stigma, not anything else. Now, she's accurate. She says, this is me projecting that fear and insecurity on the other person. Listen to this, however. Now she's going to justify it. That's really where it ends. That, if you stopped right there, that is the most constructive thing to say. To acknowledge that when I go through this splitting process, I put you on the pedestal and then I knock you down because you, quote, let me down by not being what I thought you were going to be. And then I go through this fear of abandonment, and then I lose empathy for you and I attack you and I hurt you or whatever else I do. Then what you said is absolutely perfect. You said, this is me projecting that fear and insecurity on the other person. Period. Stop. That's where it ends. And then you walk away owning that. But if you don't do that, there's a possibility you could then, in the same breath, turn around and destroy that healing acknowledgement you just made, which is what you're about to do. You say, this is me projecting that fear and insecurity on the other person. However, meaning, now forget what I just said. I'm going to crap all over what I just said, and now I'm going to blame you. That's exactly what you do. This is me projecting that fear and insecurity on that other person. However, if that person were to start crying or make it obvious to you that I was hurting them, it's likely I will feel absolutely awful. Now she goes on to say something. Now what I'm waiting for is her to say something which she doesn't say. Which is, if she were to then say, and then I am going to never do that ever again, and I'll prove that I'll never do it because a month from now, a year from now, I'm either never going to do that again or I'm going to improve. She doesn't say that. So the first thing she does is she owns that she's the one that's splitting and it's her projection, which is great, but then she turns around and justifies it and makes it my fault. She uses you or whoever. It's the other person's fault. And in order for them to get her, according to her, in order for them to see that she's hurting them, they have to start crying. Or they have to do something that she says is make it obvious to her that they're hurting her. That is a lack of empathy. That is sociopathic. And it's horrifically cruel. I dated a woman, looking back on it, she probably had borderline traits, but whatever. It was a long time ago. But I remember she was just she probably was borderline. She was raging at me. She was raging at me and calling and accusing me of things I hadn't done, and I started tearing up. And then she goes, "Oh, I see you're crying. Oh, okay, I see that you," because I was telling her I didn't do that, I didn't say that, I didn't mean that. And now I'm looking back, she probably was borderline. And then, after she just wouldn't hear a thing and just kept on railing at me, I just started tearing up, and I just gave up, and tears were falling out of my head. And she stopped. She goes, "Oh, I see that you're crying now. Oh, I see that you mean what you say." And I looked at her and I said, "If I have to cry for you to see that I mean what I say, this is over." And it was. And I said, "That's it. I'm not doing this." That's how cruel. You don't realize how cruel what you just said was. I'm not saying that to attack you. That's a lack of empathy right there. It doesn't show your empathy because somebody they're crying, or that and she goes on to another really extreme thing, or make it obvious I was hurting them. In other words, if that person were to start crying or make it obvious I was hurting them, why isn't it obvious for me to say, "I didn't ever say that. That really hurts me"? Why isn't that obvious enough? I mean, how obvious does somebody have to make it? If that person were to start crying or make it obvious that I was hurting them, it's likely I will feel absolutely awful. Or let's say that person were to get a call with bad news, like a family member was sick or hurt, or anything else that is horrible, something that had nothing to do with us, meaning the borderline. I would forget our issues for the moment and comfort that person because I can feel people's pain. That's exactly what my borderline did. And then she turned around and split on me and discarded me. What you just described is actually incredibly cruel. And just because you think it means you have empathy because what's happened, and let me flesh it out for you. You're saying, in order for me, you don't even say that it happens all the time. You say, perhaps if the person were to start crying and make it obvious that I was hurting them, then in the moment, you even say, I would drop it for the moment and I would go and take care of them. That's not enough. Because then what happens after because it's all projection. You're projecting, because crying means horrific pain, which you identify with, so you can project yourself into that. That gives you the ability to have empathy, but you're really having projected empathy on yourself. So you're not having empathy necessarily for me or whoever's crying. You're having empathy because you know what it's like to be so hurt that you're crying. And so you go to comfort them, as you say, in the moment. But then the problem is that creates a bond. That makes the other person feel safe, and then they love you and creates a bond with you. You're going to bounce the next day. And that makes what you think was a part of your empathy, it makes it an even deeper act of cruelty. Because you open us up to love you and trust you and feel like we're making progress, and then you slam on us. If you're a quiet borderline, you get the phone call or the ghosting, or if you're not, you're yelling and screaming at them the next day or right there in the moment. That, again, you're talking about your narcissism, and that doesn't mean that you have empathy for other people. I was watching a borderline talk about themselves on YouTube, and they were saying that people really need to understand that borderlines have so much empathy that we have the ability to tap into the unconscious pain of the world. I know that's what it feels like. But it's incredibly narcissistic to be so wrapped up in that you have no ability to see what you're doing to other people. So it's not about your feelings in the moment. The true awareness is to have all of your feelings, positive and negative, without judgment. And then still have the ability to look at things objectively and take conscious, constructive action. When you can do that, then you can tell me that you have empathy. But if you're going to use the word empathy as a way to justify why you do hurtful things, and the most hurtful thing is to make me think that now you're going to love me. Now you see me and you're going to love me and take care of me, and then that is the reason that you split on me the next day. That's worse. You would have been better off just staying angry at me. I would have been better off if you had just stayed angry at me. All right? So I could keep going because it kind of repeats itself here, but I really want, if borderlines have the ability to listen and hear that and not take it personally, and if you can't, I understand, it's hard to hear this kind of stuff. To understand that your experience of feeling that you have all this empathy, and that's why you do what you do, that your empathy really isn't empathy. It's narcissistic projection. And there's nothing wrong with having it. Nothing wrong with being in pain. There's nothing wrong with we all project. I mean, projecting your pain or your fear onto somebody else. There's nothing wrong with that. But that feeling like that woman said, that we feel the pain of the whole world, that's again an infant. Infants feel like they're the only beings that have emotions. So this is really infantile, narcissistic emotions, that this is what therapy helps you do. To have that, to individuate, to love yourself through that. And then when you love yourself through your own feelings, then you'll be able to love others when you're having bad feelings and when they're having bad feelings. And this is true for everybody. But borderlines are a really good, microscope, intense view of what everybody has to go through. All right, so I'm going to stop with her thing. I hope that she's able to hear that and not take it personally. Let's see. I'm sure there's some questions. I prefer questions, but I'll respond to whatever I feel I can do to be helpful here. So, what else? Yeah, okay, so I'm in agreement with that. So if you have a question, because what will happen if there's a lot of questions, I'll just bypass all of the, what looks like comments. So if you have a question, write the word question in the beginning, usually in all caps, just that first word, and then I'll see it. If I don't see that, I may miss your question, and I don't want to do that. Let's see. Everything is a trigger with them, even laying my hair in the grass or wanting pineapple in my pizza is a trigger. Yeah, I know. I get you. Let's see what else. Stephanie says pride is what makes them cruel. No, that's not true. Quite the opposite. So Stephanie, I want to encourage you to do some more work on yourself and do some more work on looking at what borderline personality disorder is. It's a mental illness. It has nothing to do with pride. They're not bad people. In fact, my borderline ex, if we were to just get rid of the borderline part, she was one of the most amazing people I'd ever met. Really, she really truly wants to be, and truly is, a kind, loving person. She really does have a lot of empathy for people. She actually, to the best of her ability, I don't know what's happened since I met her, or since we split up, but to the best of her ability, she really worked hard not to be angry and cruel, but she had borderline personality disorder, so she couldn't stop it. So I don't agree with you that pride is what makes them cruel. What makes them cruel is their inability to see past their own pain. They're trying to protect themselves, and they think in their mental illness, their distorted thinking at that moment, they think you're trying to destroy them. They don't even understand how or why. They just know that you're out to destroy them because they're so afraid of bonding with you and getting hurt that their mind kicks in and gets so wrapped up and creates these scenarios that aren't true, and the end result is they're very cruel towards you. It's got nothing to do with pride. Now, the reason why you think it's pride is because you still want them to love you. When you can truly work through your issues, and I got 3 things, this is what the join button is all about. Right? If you can do the 3 things of go to therapy, go to CODA, somebody asked me this, what should I look for at CODA.org? Go to a CODA meeting. That's what you should look for. Go to CODA.org and start working the 12 steps on your codependence. And then 3, do daily meditation. In my experience, those 3 things, if you really put everything you have into that, you can completely heal from whatever borderline relationship you are in. I don't have any pain or anger, as you can tell. I have no resentment towards her whatsoever. I have nothing but love and compassion for her. But I also know that she's incredibly dangerous for me, and I can have nothing to do with her. But I'm not angry with her, and I don't blame her for anything that she did. In fact, my hat's off to her for trying as hard as she did. She really wanted to. She really wanted to make it work. She really tried. She has a mental illness. Prevents her from being able to do it. It's not her fault. The cruelty is that they don't see what they're doing. The cruelty comes from what will happen. Their mental illness will respond when the intimacy is at its greatest. And so for you, when the intimacy is at its greatest, it means that you are most open, you have these loving feelings for them, you feel a bond and a connection, and then they will break up with you right after you propose to them. They'll break up with you or split on you right after you've had the best sex of your life, or that you've bought them a house, or you've, something that puts you at a tremendous state of vulnerability. Again, they're projecting onto you. They see how vulnerable and open you are and how much you love them, and they project on to you their fear of abandonment, and they end up doing to you the very thing they don't want done to themselves. But because it's happening in their narcissistic trauma defense mechanism experience, they don't understand that they're doing it to you. The cruelty, though, is it's as if they planned it out. So the cruelty is that it will be as if they planned out the worst possible time and manipulated you. This is the difference between a borderline and a true narcissist. A narcissist plans it out. Says, I'm going to plan out their destruction. The borderline doesn't plan it out, but the mental illness within them does. Because what's really happening is they're responding to the depth of emotional bond and intimacy. And so it's got nothing to do with them being cruel. They really don't want to be that way. Unless they're comorbid, of course, etc., etc. TC, I tried ignoring her, then she would text me. All right, so let's talk about going no contact. No contact doesn't mean that you don't text her. It means that you block your phone, you block your Facebook, you block your email, you pick up and move. If you have to, you get a restraining order. You block her ability to contact you. So come on, that doesn't mean anything. Now you tried ignoring her, but you really didn't, did you? Because she was able to text you. And then you say, I talked to her. So that's not ignoring her. She's not forcing you to do anything. She blocks you in between messages. Okay, good. Block her back. She then said, never contact her again. Then 4 days later, text me. Why won't I talk to her? Finally, I pulled her aside and said, I will never say hi nor speak to her again. So it's been silence for 4 days. But seeing her bothers me. I don't know what to tell you. If you have the fact that you have to keep seeing her, that's tough. I don't know how to help you with that one. All right, let's see what else. So TC, you need to do the three things that I just said: therapy, coda, and meditation. So bear in mind, I have empathy for everybody, but I have no sympathy for anybody listening to me who is with a borderline or trying to get out of a borderline and they're not doing those three things. The only, anybody can find therapy. If you look hard enough, you can find therapy on the web. Don't tell me you can't, because I don't have the links, but I found it. I have a therapist, so I don't have to worry about it, but I went looking for it and I found it one day. Somebody gave me a link and showed me a website with a bunch of links. So you can. But even if you couldn't, you can still do coda.org for free. And you can talk to people, and you can get a sponsor, and you can get people who you can talk to on a regular basis and support. If you're not willing to do that, I have no sympathy for you. If I see you come back on and keep telling me about how you can't do this and they won't do that, I'm not going to have any sympathy for you, because I know that you're wanting to stay in your codependence. I understand it. It's very hard to get out, but if you want help, you can get help. See what else? Claire Stevens. What else? Let's see. Where was I? Okay, sorry for the silence. This is why I'm looking for questions or people putting comments on. All right, Erica. So this is the person who left the comment. So I hope Erica sees I have no ill intention towards her whatsoever. And that actually her comment, I think, is incredibly helpful for the discussion. And as I said, for me, this channel is not about borderlines. I didn't make it for borderlines. I have no agenda about that, all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't know, even know how to treat a borderline. But I think one thing I can do is this can be a place, if they want to, and I'm not saying they should go do whatever the hell they need to do. But if they want to come and actually empathize what it's like to be on the other end, this is a good place to do it, because I want this to be a safe place. Because there's really no place for the partners. There's plenty of borderlines who have channels and they talk about what it's like to live with borderline personality disorder. It's great. I think that's awesome. There's no shortage of therapists on YouTube who talk about borderline personality disorder from an objective perspective, a clinical perspective. That doesn't help the person who's been with a borderline and been destroyed and damaged and discarded. That doesn't help them. The only way it can is if they can possibly see that borderline personality disorder is a mental illness and that they really aren't these evil geniuses that are out to try and destroy you. That's why they did that, and I can't be with them, but it's nothing personal, and then they can heal. Then they can take a look at their own codependence. And there are no shortage of people out there who are co-signing borderlines. And there are no shortage of codependents out there who attack me because of what I say about how horrific it is, and how sociopathic it feels, and all that kind of stuff. And people, these codependents, and when I tell people that they shouldn't date borderlines, they get very upset because they're married to a borderline or they're dating a borderline, and they don't want to hear that. If you're with a borderline and they haven't been in therapy for 10 years and know what they're doing, there's virtual assured ultimate discard coming, and it's going to be the worst thing you ever imagined. And that's because they have a mental illness. They don't want to tell me that. So here are two things that everybody should be aware of, in my opinion. Take it for what it is. Number one, you have to understand that this is a mental illness. If you see it as anything less than that, then you are minimizing the trauma that the borderline went through and goes through all the time. You're also setting yourself up if you're a partner. If you don't understand it's a mental illness, then you'll try and understand why they rationally do what they do, and it's not rational. And it will only cause you more pain and confusion, and it will keep you enmeshed. So that's the first thing. What was the second thing? There was a second one. I forget what the second one was. Anyway, it'll come to me. Let's see, what else? So Erica says, well, I did not mean to attack, maybe criticize, but not attack. Being misunderstood hurts. So Erica, really, this is, how have I misunderstood you? I don't know you. You are not the embodiment of borderline personality disorder. I don't even know, to what extent you have it or where you are on the spectrum. And if, on almost all of my videos, I give a disclaimer. I'm saying, I'm talking about toxic borderlines. If you're not a toxic borderline, I'm not talking about you. I'm not criticizing you. But even if I am, just because you feel hurt by that, it doesn't change my experience. Nor does it change everybody else's experience. It's not an either or. It's not you're okay and they didn't really hurt me, or I was hurt and you're horrible. It's somewhere in the middle. Yes, I was really hurt. And yes, you are a good person. And so is my borderline ex, who I still, I can honestly say I love her. I'm not in love with her anymore. I'm not going to date her anymore, but I love her. And I want nothing but the best for her. I have no negative feelings. I'm not criticizing her. It's a really important, in my, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it can be very helpful if a borderline, if they want to recover, to be able to hear what it's like for the partner of a borderline, because we suffer just as much as you do from your mental illness if we're connected to you. To be able to hear that without taking it personally. That will show, if you, it's okay with me if I say these things and you feel personally criticized. I'm okay that that's your response. I can have empathy for you. I can care about you. But I'm not going to somehow minimize what I say or what I felt just because I'm afraid it's going to hurt your feelings. Because that's not relevant. Okay? So you didn't attack me, you didn't criticize me, I saw that. But I'm also not attacking or criticizing you. And I'm not misunderstanding you. I don't think I'm misunderstanding you. I think I understand you pretty well. Let's see. But I appreciate this video. Knowing what I know about sociopaths and being compared feels absolutely awful. Again, it's great that you're talking about your feelings, and I accept that feeling. But there's a difference between a sociopath and sociopathic. If you're a borderline, when you split and you cause people harm, you are being sociopathic. If we take you in that moment you are a sociopath. But it's not limited to borderlines. I've been sociopathic. I get sociopathic. I get my feelings hurt. Other people do. It happens. It's a normal human thing. But again, it's not about, you have a feeling about it, but again, being able to have your feeling and not have that rule everything you say and do is healing. And if you were my friend, I'm not trying to be your friend, but if you were my friend, and if I were to say that and you would say to me, it really hurts me when I hear you say that, I feel like you're comparing me to a sociopath, and I don't feel I don't want to be a bad person, I would be there with you, and I would listen to your feelings, and I would, but it wouldn't necessarily mean that I would then co-sign any hurtful behavior that you did, or it wouldn't necessarily mean that I wouldn't say that feels very sociopathic when you act like that. You see the middle point? It's okay for both to exist at the same time. Claire Stevens, okay, question. Can you break down their projection for us? Let me read your whole question before I respond. Can you break down their projection for us? Do they ever know they are projecting? For example, my ex said, if I were you, I would hang myself. No, the whole point of projection is that it's coming from the unconscious. So we have three minds. We have the conscious mind. That's the part of you listening to me now. You think you know what's going on. Oh, I can see the sun off of the tree there. The air conditioning is a little cold. He just said this. I'm hungry. That's your conscious mind. Then you have the unconscious mind. You have a subconscious mind too, but we're not going to deal with that. Most of the time when people say the word subconscious, they mean unconscious. The unconscious mind is the part of you that you are not aware of. But this is the 95% of you. All of your thoughts, feelings, your programming, your childhood issues, your beliefs, your fears, your self-sabotage, all these things, and your spiritual path in life, all these things are in your unconscious. You're not consciously aware of it. The path of the point of all meditation is to try and become conscious. And I think the point of all therapy is to become conscious of what's in the unconscious. So when somebody projects, what it means is that they're having a thought or a feeling or an experience that they either cannot or are not willing to consciously experience. And so you walk in the room and there's something about you that stimulates that feeling inside of them, and then all of a sudden they see it on you. So for instance, let's say somebody has unconscious rage. Right? They have unconscious rage towards their mother. They're not aware of it. They had to press it down. Their mother beat them or something when they were kids, and in order to survive, they suppressed it. They no longer remember it. They don't think about it. I love women. I loved my mother. Everything was beautiful. It's a survival mechanism. People who've been through damaging things. Some woman walks in the room or let's say his girlfriend walks in the room who's wearing earrings that were exactly like his mother's, and all of a sudden he looks at the earrings and for some reason he doesn't understand, he feels all this anger around him. And then looks at her, and because he unconsciously is stimulated remembering his mother, he starts thinking, she's angry at me. And he starts to go, wow, I really don't need your anger right now. You're so angry. She's like, what are you talking about? I just walked in the room. Do you like my new earrings? Oh my God, you're so angry. They're totally clueless. Projection means that they are unconsciously projecting onto you what they're experiencing. This is why when the borderlines devalue you, and like I say, the longer you're with a toxic borderline, the devaluation gets worse and worse and worse and worse, until eventually you can no longer feel more of. When you can't feel any more devalued, they will discard you for good. And the reason for that is that they've projected onto you and induced into you how horrible they feel about themselves. And when there's nothing left for them to give to you so you can know what it feels like, and again, this is all unconscious, they're not conscious of this at all. Then when they see that there's no more, then they will discard you because you don't serve any purpose for them anymore. Because on an unconscious level, everybody wants the other person to feel how they feel. If you're full of love and self-empowerment, you look to make other people feel loved and self-empowered. And you'll project onto other people that. You'll say, in fact, my fiance who's passed away, she was my soulmate. She wasn't the ex I'm talking about. She was my soulmate. She was wonderful. And she had this ability to look at me and tell me how amazing I was. And I knew I wasn't as amazing as she thought I was. And thankfully, she wasn't just idealizing. But she was projecting onto me feelings that she had about, inside of herself. If you're filled with horrific pain, if you've been through horrific devaluation and your identity is non-existent because you've been devalued, you're gonna unconsciously induce that into whoever you're with. That's the sad part about it. So no, they don't know what they're doing. They have no conscious awareness. He honestly thinks whatever he said. There was something about you that he honestly believes that in that moment, which is why it makes him sociopathic. He has no real empathy for you in that moment or knows what's going on with you. In that moment, he is sociopathic. But he's projecting. So that's why you can't take it personally. It's not about you. Let's see what else. Yes, Stephanie, I already talked about the pride. They're not full of pride. That's not pride. You're projecting. That's projection right there. Codependents do it too. You're projecting your pride. When they split on you, what happens is that your pride is affected. It hurts your pride and it hurts mine too. I'm just like you. What you're doing right now is you're projecting onto them your ego and your pride. That's not what's happening. That's not what's going on with them. Erica says, I didn't want to look at your other videos. I also did empathize with you. I saw from what you said about your ex that I too had been in a similar situation. Yeah, but the point, Erica, is that really you really didn't empathize with me. I mean, I'm not judging you, but and I understand because again, I wouldn't want to hear that either. So I get why you didn't want to hear it. I get why you feel like I was comparing you to a sociopath. And I was in a lot of pain back then, and that was the conclusion I needed to make in order to heal. I needed to assume that my borderline ex had no real feelings for me because that helped me to let go and move on. Just like with Stephanie, she has to say that her borderline ex was filled with pride because that gives her the ability, that judgment gives her the ability to separate. You understand that because that's what borderlines do every time they split. They demonize the other person so that they can separate, because if you see them as actually loving you, it's very hard to act on your fear of self-preservation and run away. So you understand that as well, but really you weren't empathizing with me. I'm not judging you for that, I'm just pointing it out. The whole point of that was for you to tell me I was wrong and to tell me that you're not like that. And to, that was really your point. And, you can say that with feelings. You don't have to point fingers at me and tell me how I don't know what's going on. It's okay with me if I don't. You know what I mean? Let's see what else. Yeah, so I understand what Erica is saying here. Yeah, so from what you said, sir, I felt attacked and hurt. Again, I didn't even know you existed. How could I be attacking you? I don't even know who you are. Back when I made that video, I hadn't known anything about you. I get that you feel that way. I feel that way too, but that's my narcissism. I could have taken it personally that you said there were some things that you said that I could have really taken personally, and I didn't, because in this moment, for whatever reason, I know that's got nothing to do with me, so I'm not taking it personally. I can see past it and see that, and still understand why you feel that way, but not have to take it personally that, whatever it was that you said that I may have taken offense to. So it's great that you're aware of those feelings, but it's also really important to know that your feelings are happening inside of you. It doesn't necessarily mean it's about you. And the stigma, again, I don't have the name Erica Bingham. I don't have a stigma on the person Erica Bingham. I don't know you. I'm probably, if you were sitting next to me, because, in the beginning, borderlines are usually very friendly and get along. I would probably really like you and get along with you and think you were great. The only stigma would come is if you split on me and you hurt my feelings and you did something that I experienced as being cruel and sociopathic, then I'm going to stigmatize you. Then I'm going to go, that Erica Bingham, man, she's really, see, I mean, it's really convenient to take the borderline moniker and put it on your head and think that whenever somebody says the word borderline and they had a horrible thing to say, that they're talking about you personally. But it doesn't matter. That label doesn't mean anything. The only thing that matters is what you do. I hope you can see that. Claire Stevens, is this a question? Yes. Also, is splitting when, for example, they love you and are begging for forgiveness one day, then literally the next they are saying vicious things to tear you down? Yes. So splitting is they go from idealizing you to devaluing you. And this is, again, because borderlines, as far as I can tell, in childhood, they were devalued. They were either abandoned. And again, all it would take, again, I'll share it again. I know of somebody who has a adopted sister who they adopted her, I think, at 4 months of age. And they adopted her because she had been abandoned. It's making me tear up. It's just horrifically sad. She had been abandoned. Now, I don't know how long she was abandoned for or left out in the cold or whatever the hell it was, but they took her in at 4 months of age and they loved her, and all of the other kids grew up and were really healthy, and she turned out to be borderline. It means that all it takes is just for an infant to be abandoned for just a short amount of time and something snaps. And they get stuck in that. They never get past that. It's so sad. So horrifically sad. So the reason why they split is because they're stuck at that place because they still want, they desperately, this is why you hear borderlines talk about how intensely they feel. Erica feels very intensely. Assuming she is a borderline, she feels very intensely because she's still stuck there. And that's not her fault. That's the result of whatever she went through. And she feels very intensely. The love is as intense as, anything you could possibly imagine. But it is the love of an infant. Infants have very short attention spans. Because infants don't have an identity, that love doesn't take root and take hold and create future actions. So they split. Now, because the borderlines were discarded and devalued, at the very least, the message they got was, you don't exist. because that is the message of that they carry with them all the time. When you love them, the love penetrates and hits their core identity, which is, I'm worthless and I don't exist. And they can't help but respond negatively because they're fulfilling that program of, I don't exist, I'm worthless, stop loving me. And also because the fear of being abandoned again is horrific. They were abandoned, and that fear is horrible. And when they feel love, then the fear of abandonment comes in. And they're just responding to that. It's purely impulse. It's not conscious. And that's why I don't have any blame for them when they do it. I really don't. I mean, it really saddens me. If there's one thing on the planet I could fix, it would be that. And I can't. But what I can do is I can help people like me who've been through it and can come out of those relationships and get their lives back together. So that's what splitting is. And if you'll notice, if you've been with a borderline, and this isn't talked about enough, but I think it's really important. The splitting comes from the deeper you emotionally connect with them, the harder they split on you. And it's for that very reason that I just described. That your love stimulates that horrific pain and that horrific fear, and they have no choice but to respond to that impulse. So the more they love you, the more they're going to split on you. The more they idealize you, the harder it's going to swing back the other way. And the good news is for borderlines, if they do get help, as I understand it, they can then learn to have those splits, because they're not going to go away, but they can learn to acknowledge and go, I'm splitting right now, this has nothing to do with the other person, and then they can take conscious action, even though everything inside of them is saying run out the door and divorce. And that's really all that matters. What matters is your actions. It doesn't matter what you feel. And at the same time, we should have all of our feelings. We can't stuff our feelings. This is for everybody. If you stuff your feelings, they will come out. They'll find ways to come out. If you stuff all your negative feelings, you'll act out. If you have all of your feelings and you love yourself, and that great mantra of the EFT guys, the guys that do this, that mantra of theirs, which is, even though I have this feeling, I thoroughly and completely accept myself, which means I feel like blowing my brains out, or I feel like, shooting that guy in the head, or I feel like divorcing my wife, or I feel like cheating on my wife. I have all these feelings, but even though I have this feeling, I accept that I have these feelings and I love myself. That gives you a space to then breathe and go, okay, I don't have to take it out on so-and-so. I'm assuming that's kind of what happens when borderlines get help. I don't know. So guilt. So Erica says that she has guilt. Guilt is not the same. It's okay to have guilt. Guilt can turn into something positive, but guilt is also narcissism, because I've experienced it. Having tremendous guilt does not prevent you from splitting in the future. And horrific guilt, because borderlines will say, no, it's not that I'm sociopathic. In fact, I have tremendous guilt. I want to commit suicide afterwards. That, I feel for you on that, but that's not empathy. That's narcissism. Because then you go from being, I haven't done anything wrong, to I'm the worst person that ever existed. And so the intense feeling of guilt is not so much about what you've done as what you think what people think of you. Like Erica, for instance, our interaction has been solely about what I think about you, the stigma I am putting on you. Our whole discussion has been about that. And so that's narcissism. We all have it, but that's not empathy either. Empathy can start with guilt, but then it turns into, okay, I'm not a horrible person. I have a lot of guilt. Yes, I made a mistake. And now I love myself through it. It's because I did this and I did that, and because I've got this impulse and I blah, blah, blah. And then you turn to the other person and you go, wow, you really didn't deserve that. But you know what? I'm not going to do it again. Or, my borderline ex, there was one moment of sanity where she looked at me and she said, maybe you shouldn't be with me because I don't know if I'm going to be able to stop changing. That was probably the most empathic, the most real experience I had with her. Being the good codependent, I didn't listen. But I think that was a real moment. So true empathy is to be able to think about the other person before yourself, even after you've made a mistake. Guilt isn't helpful for that. And I can say that on the other end of it, if somebody has tremendous guilt, that doesn't make me feel better, and it doesn't give me hope that unless I'm narcissistic or really immature, codependent, whatever, if I'm looking for revenge. Other than that, guilt doesn't do anything for me either. You having guilt doesn't help me. So I understand that you have guilt, but that can be just the flip side of the narcissism that can be experienced. So I'm not telling you not to have guilt or to not have guilt, but to be able to, if you can turn that guilt into a calm commitment to, I'm not going to do this in the future, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure I don't do it in the future, then that will be a sign of true empathy. When it turns into lasting change. It's not about the feeling in the moment. Let's see. Let's see what else. What is Erica saying? You said that okay, there was a huge stigma around. I emphasized your situation. I said in my response, I have remorse and guilt over past relationships that I had a part in causing the break. Just because my response was feelings on your topic about how I felt does not mean I do not sympathize. It means I only know what you said to me. I didn't say anything to you, unless you're talking about right now. You only said a bunch of what you thought BPD was. Well, no, that's not true. Now you're not being fair. To be honest, that's really hurtful that you just said that. So sit with that for a moment, understand my feelings. It's okay for me to have negative feelings about you. It's not a personal attack. But that was a hurtful thing to say, because that's not what I said. You only said a bunch of what you thought BPD was. The assumption with that is that I was wrong. But if you can take your personal hurt out of it, and imagine me talking about something that you don't relate to, and I start talking about how hurtful it is, these people do this and these people do that, you'd be able to nod your head because it's not about you. So if you can make this not about you, right, then when I talk about what BPDs do and what they say and how they act, it's nothing personal. It doesn't mean that I'm talking about your specific strain of BPD. You're on a spectrum. I don't know what spectrum you're on. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about it in general. And I'm talking about it for people who are trying to survive. Again, Erica, if you can take a look at the horrific damage that it causes partners, there's a whole community of people out there that have nobody who will give them this balanced perspective of love and empathy for the borderline, and at the same time acknowledge the horrific pain they've been through. When I talk about what borderlines are or aren't, it's not about pointing fingers at you to make you feel bad. It's about helping the other people to understand, oh my God, it's not about me. They have a mental illness. And they can separate and heal. If you really want to have empathy right with me right now in that moment. Have empathy for the people you don't know, that don't know you, that were really damaged by borderline personality disorder. And be willing to cut them some slack, and cut me some slack. You know, when I was making that video, I was literally fighting for my existence. Suicide was a real option for me in that moment. So I'm okay with the fact that I may not have had your understanding of, or the accurate understanding of BPD. If it helped me to separate and to lovingly separate without taking revenge or without trying to stay connected and heal myself, I'm okay that I didn't get it right. And as I said, there are more videos that I made. I made one 6 months later, and I'm making one now. So I'm okay. I'm happy to keep changing my understanding as time goes on. But really, I think the exercise here for you can be to learn to have all of the feelings that you have and still have empathy for me and everybody else. It's not an either or. It's not a competition. There's not a winner or a loser here. Everybody's hurt by this. See what else? All right, so you guys are talking to each other. No, Stephanie Cervantes, you don't understand borderline personality disorder. I'm telling you that straight off so that now Erica knows I'm not just pointing fingers at her. Stephanie, you are deep in your codependence. You do not understand. Me too, Mike, she says. I agree they are kind, but the other half is vicious. There is no other half. You are ascribing intent to what you perceive as vicious. I'm not denying that somebody was vicious to you, and I'm not denying that somebody was prideful, and I'm not saying that they are, unreasonably, irrationally hurtful. You are trying to ascribe intent to their actions which may not be there. And it doesn't serve you to think of them that way, to think of them as vicious and won't take accountability because of pride. That is purely your judgment based on your projection. I'm telling you that straight off. That is your projection based on your internal experience. That's you. You right now are not taking accountability for choosing to be with one because of your pride. It's okay, but that's what's happening here. They're not vicious. And let's talk about vicious. When you're out in the ocean and a shark's coming at you and he's viciously tearing your legs off, he's not thinking about you like, oh gosh, that Stephanie, I'm going to do this to her and really make her feel bad because I'm vicious. They're just being who they are. Borderlines honestly believe in the moment that you're trying to kill them. They believe that you're trying to destroy them. They're deathly afraid. And they're responding out of the basest survival instinct response that they have, which is to be, in this case, in your case, vicious. But it's not an intent. They may act viciously, but it doesn't mean that they are vicious and prideful. Now I'm going to tell you again, I want you to listen. Because if you can hear this is really important. The fact that you need to see your ex as prideful and vicious means that you still love him, and you think if you can get him to understand how vicious he is, he will stop and rationally look at it and stop hurting you. You don't understand that it's a mental illness. You think that he's rational and he's just choosing to be mean because of his pride. And that means you still love him, which means you are still a candidate, and the next person that comes along that has BPD or NPD is going to scoop you up and make a meal out of you. So if you really want to heal from this, again, coda.org, therapy, try and find out what your side of it is, what got you involved, so that you don't feel the need to judge them in order to separate. Okay, what else? Yeah, being abusive and neglectful. They got a really horrible mental illness that causes them to do that. I'm not denying that part. I'm not denying that. What else? What else? Anything else? Maui Guitar School. What else? No, that's okay. That's not a question. Okay, so Moto then Toda. I'm going to block you. You want to know why? It's not okay what you just did. You just told Erica to shut up. It's not cool. So you don't get to talk like that to people on my channel. I don't care how badly you're hurt. Erica's doing her best. She's coming on here and she's sharing the best that she can, and she's really trying, and she's trying to be respectful and kind. That's not okay to talk to people like that. What else? Erica Bingham, yeah, okay. Yeah, so Erica, I want to just give you the opportunity to stop being a victim. There's no need for you to be a victim here. Nobody's victimizing you. You left a long comment that everybody in the world can read. And I am. I'm making a video about it because it's really good discussion. So I know you might even be splitting in through this whole thing. You might be going back and forth. But I hope that you can, hear what I'm really trying to do. And this is what this channel is about having these discussions and about looking at both sides of things. And so I'm going to keep doing that. It's not about you. We're not making a victim out of you. And nobody here, well, speaking for myself, I have no ill feelings towards you whatsoever. What else? I just put somebody else on hold. Anytime I see somebody being hurtful to anybody, I'm going to either put you on hold or block you. Yep, Erica, you're right. The guy who told you to shut up, I blocked him. He doesn't get to talk anymore. Claire Stevens says, I was with one for 6 months and I wound up with PTSD. So PTSD is, I would even say complex PTSD, because that's what the borderline has. Borderline is a form of complex PTSD, and by being with them, you're going to end up experiencing that as well. Because again, all they're doing is they are unloading onto you what is constantly happening inside of them. And the only reason it's worst for the romantic partners, because the romantic partner is the one that gets closest and closest to their real self, and their real self is full of all this self-directed negativity. And so staying in it repeatedly will create CPTSD. That's why if you're a survivor and you've been with a borderline, you need therapy, you need coda.org, and you need meditation. That's all I know. Otherwise, in my experience, it never goes away. So just because you're not in the relationship anymore doesn't mean you're going to heal. You've now got this negativity inside of you that you picked up from the borderline that you take with you. Obviously, it's stimulated your own codependence that you had to begin with, but that's why there needs to be those three things. Click the join button if you want to know more about it. Click at the super empath level and you'll get access to member-only videos where I tell you what I did to heal. And I talk about the three things. Also, the 90-day challenge, you can take a look at that. That is something on my other channel which can also be used together with it in a very helpful way. What else? Anything else? Claire Stevens says it's hard to distinguish BPD and NPD. I think I could tell the difference. I think that, well, from what I understand, BPD and NPD are really the same issue. That BPDs are vulnerable narcissists, whereas NPDs are invulnerable narcissists. Meaning that the NPD never has a vulnerable moment where they go back and forth between that, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. The NPD never really feels for you. They see you as an object they want to destroy, but it's the same thing. In other words, an NPD is a borderline that is in constant negative split mode. So when borderlines split and they see you as the devil and they're going to go after you and do whatever, the NPD is in that stage 24/7. And they hide it really well. Borderlines don't hide it so well. And they vacillate back and forth. But it is hard. The end result, borderlines, it's important to know this. The end result is that the effect of BPD is exactly the same on partners as NPD. Survivors of BPD and NPD end up feeling the exact same thing. So there's no difference. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter that the borderlines go back and forth between feeling guilty and splitting, because the end result is just as damaging. And that's why a lot of people, and you'll see it on here, and I have no problem continuing to address it, survivors are always wanting to make their borderline out to be narcissists, always. But that's because the end result is always the same. So again, it's not about what you feel, it's about what you do. Let's see what else. Trying to look for the questions here or something that I can really respond to. Some dude X, I'm not going to tell you who it is. You figure it out on your own. It's somebody who claims to have recovered fully from borderline personality disorder, and if you watch her channel, whenever she's probably going to watch this one, she's going to go and make a video about how I'm wrong. She's now gotten a little more subtle about it. She used to take my titles and use the exact titles for her videos. And she'll say, one of the other things is that she goes on and on about how borderlines don't split because of love. And so those are the two things that she does. I'm not going to say what her name is, but you'll be able to figure it out. But the reason why I point that out is because she's a borderline, and she claims to be cured, and she does these really narcissistic, sociopathic things when nobody's looking. And she does it to me on a regular basis. And also refuses or is incapable of acknowledging that her splits are because she feels loved and she feels the bond. She also rails against psychology and says how wrong they are, but it's because they say things like borderline personality disorder is a mental illness and other things that she doesn't like because she doesn't want to see it in herself. Last I heard, she now isn't even a borderline, she's something else. So she's got some great information, that you can sit there and learn a lot from her, but really good representation of, the borderlines can be great. They can talk a really good game and they can mean everything, and then they'll split on you and do the exact opposite and have either no remorse and or no ability to take responsibility or change. And that's important to know, because trying to be in a relationship with one, that's where you're going to end up. They're going to end up doing that to you, unless, like I said, they've got at least 10 years of therapy, and and they are aware that it is a mental illness, and they are aware of what causes them to split is the attachment that causes so much fear and pain within them. Let's see what else. All right, that's it. No other questions, nothing else to say. So I'm going to call it an evening or a morning or a night or whatever the hell it is for you. So thanks for watching. And again, click the join button if you want to, at the super empath level, if you want to find out what I did, things that I learned, and practical techniques that you can use to give you that extra edge, and the 3 things that I did. Also, the 90-day challenge, if you want to look into that, that's something else. But that's, I found, really helpful to help people get connected to their goals in their life. Because if you end up with a borderline, you lose your life. You don't know who you are, what you're doing. You've been living for that other person this whole time. And now you've got to learn how to live for yourself. So those are 2 things that I offer to you. Of course, if you want to keep the little borderline from crying, subscribe and click the bell button, and she will magically be cured. It will be the only borderline in existence that you'll be able to cure, but if you click on that, she will go to sleep and be very happy. Let's see what else. Anything else? What else? Maui Guitar School. How can I feel better about my BPDX moving on so quickly? Why would I tell you to feel better about that? You're not supposed to feel better about that. That's horrible. That's a horrible thing that somebody should do. The problem is that you don't want to have your feelings. I understand it, but wanting to feel better isn't what you need. What you need is to have those feelings and to acknowledge them and work them. Wanting to feel better is try and pretend you don't have them, which is it's like when a parent goes, I'll give you something to cry about. You better knock that off. That's what you're doing to yourself when you say, I want to feel better. I don't want to have this pain. Your child comes to you and is weeping, says, my best friend just left me and I'm so sad. You wouldn't say, well, what can we do to make you feel better? Can you just stop crying? You would go, oh, and you'd pick him up and you'd hold him and you'd say, it's okay, cry it out. It's okay to be sad. Do that with yourself. The woman you love, moved on quickly to somebody else, like you didn't even fucking exist. So 3 things: therapy, coda.org, meditation, and have all of your feelings. What else? Melissa Mason, Mike, do you have flashbacks from your relationship? Nope. I did those 3 things. If you're having flashbacks, it means that you're having PTSD. It means you're still very, very attached on an unconscious level, and you need some therapy and you need coda, in my opinion. It's very normal. I did in the beginning. I don't now. Does your BPDX continue coming back to you? How would I know? I blocked her. I've completely blocked her. There's no way for her. Well, she probably could if she tried hard enough, but I've made it hard enough. Obviously, she either hasn't wanted to, or if she has, it hasn't gotten to me. That's the whole point of blocking. You block them so they can't. All right, that's it. I'm done. Have a great whatever time of the 24-hour period it is for you. And I will see you guys all very soon.